Okay, today I want to talk about disruptive technology. Okay, last time we talked about the evolution. Few concepts we talked about. The long wave, contrary wave. Remember the Russian economist. Diffusion of technology. Diffusion of technology is exactly this. Slow growth, rapid growth declines. Moore's law, we talked about Moore's law. We talked about exponential growth. Remember the chessboard? We talked about the general law of accelerating returns. This is Kurzweil. Every generation produces an input into the next generation. We talked about the technology life cycle and the adoption life cycle. So now we're going to continue and talk about disruptive technologies and technologies that really change the way people work, behave, and so on. The first question is this. I mean, why do startups exist? If you think about, here's a market, some products being sold, services, and there's a startup to compete with that, these companies in that market. Why would they do that? I mean, you have an established big company, they have all the processes in order, they have all the staff, and you're going to start up a company underfunded to compete with a giant. Why would you do that?
Because these giants are pretty slow in what they're doing, and
Yes.
introducing new products, and when there's just two nerds starting a startup, it's getting old.
Yeah, exactly, you're correct. However, there's one crucial thing also that we should mention, is that these two nerds, they cannot possibly compete with the company. So they have to do something different. They have to offer something else. It can be a new product, better value, better service, something new. Startups are happening all the time. And it's because everything is changing all the time. Technology is always changing. And this leads to opportunities and threats. For the nerds that was mentioned here, for the people that are founding these companies, they are looking at the opportunities. Now, for the incumbent companies, incumbent meaning they exist, they have the market, there's a new technology coming along and you're in this business. What do? Do you look at it as an opportunity or as a threat? Think about Kodak. That was the reading assignment for today. They actually invented the first digital camera. But did they look at it as an opportunity? No. Well, it would kill their margins. Film was their main revenue generator. So creating a digital camera, and they would subsidize cameras and sell films. This is a Gillette concept, the razor blade. Give the razor away and sell the blades. Great concept. Cheap cameras, subsidize them, like the Kindle is today. It's subsidized by Amazon. So you buy books. But it's really difficult to sell cheap digital cameras because there's no film. So the business model doesn't work. So for them, it was clearly a threat. And there's another story I want to share with you this morning. And it's another company. It's a company here in Iceland. Do you know this company? They have had some really tough times. They've been selling films for many years, and it was a pretty well-established, good company. But they have been struggling over the last few years, and I'm not sure, but I think they got in some financial troubles a few years ago. But the story is this. In 1990, something, 96, 7, 8, or something like that, I was running a company that created websites, internet company. And I was asked by a person working at this company, Hans Pettersen, to give them an offer into entering the web. So they wanted to go to the web, and there was this lady that was in charge of this project, and she went to to my company and asked, what's this web thing here? Because it was relatively new. And she asked, what can we do on the web? So I sat down with my people and we thought about, okay, you have a imaging company with images. And they sell cameras, films, and they're also selling digital cameras because they were coming to the market. They were really not the high quality. I mean, the best cameras at the time when I was on this project, it was, my iPhone has much better quality. So it was in the early stages of the digital camera science. And we came up with an idea of having online picture album. Something like this. Maybe not exactly like this, but we were on this idea. I mean, we were saying, you need to move everything online because, offer uploading service to people where they can have their albums. And that was our idea. And they turned it down, said, nobody uses digital cameras today. Why not? Have you looked at the price of these things? Have you looked at the quality of these things? Digital camera is not ready. So they were here on the tipping point, going rapidly fast. And they thought, they looked at the technology as it was in the past and saw it was bad and decided not to do anything. Of course, what happened to this company is film declined and the business slowed down and they actually had nothing. I'm not sure if they had done better if they embraced the idea. But the attitude is this. When here's a new technology coming and people just don't buy it. So I'm not saying that they could have done this, but they could have done something and explored that possibility. Film, of course, went down. I mean, it was obvious. But there were a lot of skeptics. Quality of film is superior than of digital camera. Of course it was. But there's another thing. And this is the adoption of technology. People weren't looking for highest quality. They were looking for the opportunity. Because you're out there and you want to make a picture. And that's the value. You want to take a picture now. So, last week this company, founded in 1880, went into bankruptcy. And The Economist had really good analysis of this, and that's why I like that magazine, because they don't report news, they report the background of the news. So this was a reading assignment, so I asked you to read this, because I wanna talk about this article. So the first question I have, where did Kodak fail? They actually invented the digital camera in 80-something. So where did they fail? Anybody? They built the first digital camera in 1975. 75. I was talking about 90-something when they were entering the market. So it was very primitive, very early stages in the cycle. And I mean, from 1880, they had been the masters of film. And they had $16 billion in revenue in 96 and $2.5 billion in profit 99. So huge company, boom, in 10 years down the drain. So, anybody? Why did they fail? They what? Yeah, they could have been, but why didn't they?
Because they were afraid that they would kill the film.
They were afraid they would kill.
Kill the film.
Yes, exactly. They were, and this is I mean, if you're a manager and you look at the revenue streams and you have all the revenue coming from film, and you want to kill it, do you want to cannibalize it? So yeah, they were also very late. Anything else? There are a few explanations. Did you read the article? Okay. So there's actually another reason why they were so slow to change in the article. Do you remember that one?
Because these iPads, they make what, small pan or something like that?
Yeah. I'm not sure about that. But there was it was kind of a family company, but
They were used to no competition. They were always number one. Failed to recognize the competition.
yeah, that's a good point. They were always they weren't used to competition, but you know there were some competitors, but they never came close. Kodak was the winner. But there was another reason here. They say in the article. Another reason why Kodak was slow to change was that executives, then quote, suffered from mentally of perfect products rather than high-tech mindset of make it, launch it, fix it. So mentality, there's a lot about mentality in why companies fail, because the mentality of the executives is fixed in one direction, and it's really difficult to change. But then also, there was, what about Fuji? Fuji actually is okay. They're doing okay. What did they do differently? Oh yeah, well, okay, yeah, that's a point. They actually, these companies, film companies, they have a lot of chemicals. So and many of them, what did it say? There was they had 200,000 chemical compounds. Some 4,000 are related to antioxidants. So they created some beauty products, skin care products, using these chemicals. So they created they branched out the chemical division. But what they also did is they realized film is gone. So let's squeeze as much revenue out of film as we can and move on. And they went into digital cameras, cheap digital cameras that worked. And they just started to make them and make money out of selling cheap cameras. And people bought it because they were right. People just wanted cheap cameras because it was not the quality that they were after. Of course, quality is good, but they were looking for the convenience. I want to have a camera in my pocket wherever I go. If I travel, I want to have a camera on me, and if I see an opportunity, I will take a picture. It's not that I'm gonna open up a show of picture or something. And another thing, Fuji went into LCD screens. That's another thing. So what they try to do is they try to diversify. They try to use their strengths and create different revenue streams out of them, because they knew film was going away. What else? So Fuji behaved differently. Another thing that happened also was that when the company starts to get off track, they see the danger coming, and what they start to do is they start to fire the boss. And they fire the boss, bring in a guy, doesn't know anything about the business, has different ideas, and the company will then have to change course. And if it's not the right course, they lose focus. Like this morning, I got the news this morning that we talked about RIM, the BlackBerry maker. It's going down, 75% stock decrease last year. They just fired the boss this weekend or this morning or Friday or whatever. So they start to fire bosses. And so there were some changes in the management of Kodak, and that's always bad. But if the boss doesn't do the job, maybe that's the alternative. Another thing, it says in the article here, there's a quote from Clay Christensen, the guy that we are going to talk about today. Perhaps the challenge was simply too great. It's a very hard problem. I have not seen any other company with such massive gulf to get across. They had so much in film, and film died. So there was no way that he's saying that it was very difficult. And it is. This is a very good article, and if you haven't read it, you should. So to summarize this, Kodak, they were late. They didn't have the mentality to change. Fuji did. They diversified and went into the new technology. But this is a very, very difficult problem. So, is it? If you think about it, you're running a company. Your company goes down with rain, and is that good? I mean, of course it's not. But then, can you have any opinion on it? Here's a guy, and let's before we go into that, let's look at some news here about.
It's the end of an era for photography pioneer Kodak. The company has filed for bankruptcy protection, saddled with $6.8 billion in debt. Kodak's been struggling to make a profit in recent years, and the shares, well, they've taken a beating. Take a look at that, sliding almost 90% in the past 12 months. The company, which traces its roots back to 1880, is seeking protection from creditors to help it overhaul the business, and analysts say a breakup could be part of that. Our reporter Olivia Stearns is here with more on the story. Olivia, this is such an iconic name. Just what's gone wrong?
Well, Owen, in short, it looks like Kodak just was too slow to make that transition from film to digital. And then in recent years, they've struggled to keep up with their competitors like Canon and HP, who overtook them in the business of making photo prints. But in some ways, Kodak accelerated its own fall. It created one of the first digital cameras back in 1975. There you see it. And at the time, the company was a giant of American industry, accounting for about 90% of films sold in the U.S. It was regularly considered one of the world's most valuable brands. Profits then peaked in the 1990s, and since then, the share price has had a steady downward slope. Just in the past 12 months, Kodak has lost another 90% of its market cap. Now, in 2005, Antonio Perez was brought in as chief executive to speed up the transition to digital, but it seems he was already too late. A former HP exec, he tried to rescue the brand by slashing costs and winning shelf space for inkjet printers at stores like Walmart and Staples. But since he arrived, revenue at Kodak has fallen in half to $7.2 billion. And today, Kodak is headed to its 6th annual loss in 7 years. So, Owen, even in that business of making those photo prints, the industry has been shifting beneath their feet. Think about it. We all used to buy those double prints, But today, people barely print photos out. They maybe do it online.
The thing is, though, not all photographic companies are having the same problems as Kodak. Fuji's all right, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a great point. Think about it. This was one of the great corporate rivalries of the 1980s. Remember what a big deal it is when Fuji, this Japanese company, won the 1984 Olympic Games contract. Compare their share price, though, for the past 10 years. Completely different tracks these two companies have been on. One reason is that Fuji has more successfully diversified its business. It's done things with its chemical components. It's also come out with innovative new businesses for films for LCD screens. But I should say it is definitely not all over for Kodak. In that statement filing for bankruptcy, the CEO said this is just a necessary step to complete the company's transformation. They still have about $5 billion worth of assets, and they're likely to sell some of those off. So we should expect to see more of a breakup, not the end of an era.
Yeah, and quite a patent catalogue as well. Thank you very much, Olivia.
So you work for a company all your life, and then boom, everything fails. Do you know winelibrary.com? Don't drink wine? There's a show. There's this guy. He grew up. The family business was a wine store. So a few years ago, he started to create this video podcast shows about him tasting wine. So he selects some wine bottles, and then he tastes them and describes the taste and talks about it 10 minutes, 15 minutes or something. And he became really successful in this, well known, and he's written a couple of books about how to market products online. And he has been doing lectures over the last couple of years talking about new media and old media. And this is a very good insights into this disruptive discussion that we're having. This guy, Gary Vaynerchuk, here he is giving a lecture talking about old media. So let's listen to this.
How many of you guys know midtownlunch.com? You know it? Awesome. One. That's great. My friend Zach has a site in New York City called midtownlunch.com. He covers 6 blocks in Manhattan. 6. And he reviews street food because he loves it. You know, gyros and shit, right? The man makes $70,000 a year in ad revenue. And he's happy. He doesn't need a boat. You know, he doesn't need a space shuttle. He's doing what he loves every day, which is writing about street food. It's fine. And he's crushing it. And more importantly, more ad revenue is going down to them. You know, I had a really tough day a couple weeks ago. Oh, actually, cool. I had a really tough day a couple weeks ago when I had to eliminate, this is great, thank you for the product placement, where I had to eliminate about 40, 50 people from the smart list, which is too bad because there wasn't that many people on it. But people were stunned when Gourmet Magazine went out of business. The amount of Twitter chatter and like posts I saw of like people caught off guard blew my mind. I was like, really? I'm stunned that there's any magazine still left. Now I know it's going to take time, so I'm not completely stunned, but the amount of people that were just shocked that they were out of business, and people were like, I feel bad. This is business. Things evolve. I felt bad for Mercedes-Benz and Patron Tequila when I saw they were actually advertising full-page ads in there. That's who I felt bad for. I mean, the game is always going to change. I had a CMO the other day in a Fortune 500 company tell me, you know, Gary, I got to be honest with you. I'm seeing some numbers that are telling me that it's going back to newspaper and TV and radio. So after I vomited in my mouth and cleaned it up, I said, interesting, Bob. Yeah, I hear you, man. I hear you. I'm gonna ride a horse down Fifth Avenue after this meeting. I mean, things are moving in one direction. There is no, it's going back. Things only go forward. Technology has no feelings. I had a really deep conversation with a guy. Really, it was intense. Great guy. He's like, Gary, you need to stop talking about this stuff. You're accelerating it. I'm like, thank you for the enormous ego boost, but I promise you I'm not. Number 2, he's like, you don't understand. It's not fair. I go, okay. He goes, I've worked for 20 years at this paper and have grinded and have paid all my dues. And this is supposed to be my 5 years where I sit up here in this cush office, make my $250K a year, golf 3 days a week. This is my cash in for all those years that I grinded. It's not fair. And I thought about it. He was a really good dude, and I felt bad. I mean, he painted this picture. And I was like, and then finally I said to him, I'm like, dude, honestly, the Holocaust is not fair. Katrina is not fair. That big-ass earthquake that happened here in '89, that's not fair when people lose their businesses over that. But dude, you're in business. And business has no feelings. Technology doesn't care about us. 0 feelings for us. It's going to change and evolve. And unless you have the ability to change and evolve, unless you are the kind of person that does not draw lines in the sand, you need to recognize the change and, more importantly, the opportunity. Because there is $1 trillion, not $1 billion, $1 trillion in ad revenue that's going to leak down to all the hyper-local, super niche opportunities for you guys. That's a lot of money. That's a game-changing amount. And I, for one, am really hungry in painting the picture for people to jump on board and get involved. It doesn't take tech skills. I did not grow up being a tech guy. I did not have computers. The most tech I was when I was 17 was I had Sega Genesis. There was no tech. This isn't about tech. You know, this isn't about I can't figure it out. There's this crazy site. It's called Google. You type in there, how do I upload a video? And it's crazy. They'll show you. I mean, everything's there. This isn't about being too old to figure it out. It's bullshit. This is about the biggest change in our society, media, which has shaped every one of your opinions and has built every brand that you give a crap about, is fundamentally being flipped upside down. That's it. 100,000 people a day who watch Wine Library TV 3 years ago were watching something else. And that program and that platform were monetizing those eyeballs. And I'm one little speck in the whole scheme of things. And it's being replicated over and over and over again.
So, technology doesn't care. It has no feelings. There was a news story in last week, and there was an interview with a person working for this company, Hans Pedersen, that I was mentioning before, the film processing company, and he was saying, very proud, that film is coming back, and this comment reminded me of the Gary Vaynerchuk talking about riding the horse down Fifth Avenue. Yeah, sure. There is this. There might be some comeback of technology, like vinyl albums, LPs. You know that one? My daughter collects LP albums. And I'm telling her, this is old, and I'm telling her. But there's this. Sometimes technology comes back in way, but it's not game-changing stuff. So technology doesn't care. The world is changing, and it has no feeling. There's actually, I had this in last lecture, but we didn't finish going over it. Kranzberg, that was a guy, professor, American professor, and he was teacher of the history of technology, and he had these laws, and I picked law number 1. Technology is neither good nor bad, nor is it neutral. So remember the adjacent possible. If you're in a room, this is the current situation of technology today. Where do we go next? Somebody will open the door, and somebody will invent the thing that will destroy businesses that exist. Remember this one? We talked about this, Western Union, and now we're going to look at the theories behind this. So, Western Union, so the story is this. Bell invented the telephone, and he went to Western Union and offered them the telephone patent for $100,000. Western Union turned him down. So Bell went into business, founding AT&T and lots of companies, and a few years later they had millions of users, millions in revenues, and became the biggest company in the world. So why would Western Union make such decision? As it turns out, they took the right decision if you look at all the good management practices that we are supposed to follow. Unfortunately, they didn't take into account that the world changes all the time. The short answer to this question is that we tend to view technology based on past usage. We always do this, especially people that don't follow technology trends. Let's take a few examples here. So here's an invention that comes along in 1876. And Western Union, they actually did an internal memo examining this, and they said, this telephone has too many shortcomings to be seriously considered as a means of communication. The device is inherently of no value to us. So some experts within the company looked at it, evaluated it, and came to this conclusion. And even the boss said, what would the company make of an electric toy? So they were not looking at the potential usage. They were looking at past, or there was no past in this case, very new. And even the I think it was the editorial of the Boston Post said, well-informed people know it's impossible to transmit voice over wire, and that were it possible to do so, thing would be of no practical value. Yeah, right. Probably the biggest business in the world, communication. 1815, railroads came along, and there was this professor at University College in London. He was really a professional skeptic of this, and he wrote many articles that this is too dangerous technology. We should not pursue this. And he said rail travel at high speed is not possible because the passengers, unable to breathe, will die of asphyxia, which is choking or Kupnen. So he actually believed that if you would go over 50 speed, which was not very common to do, you would just die because it was too fast for you. You just wouldn't breathe. And even the car, this is 1885, you get the car. So the horse is here to stay. But the automobile is only a novelty, a fad. So the horse is here to stay. This was the president of the Michigan Savings Bank. He was advising Henry Ford's lawyer not to invest in the company. So, and of course, you know this one, heavier than air, flying machines are impossible. And this is not the common man. This is the president of the Royal Society. Radio came 1905, and David Sarnoff's, he got this response: the wireless music box has no imaginable commercial value. Who would pay for a message sent to nobody? We will talk about David Sarnoff in the coming lectures, but he visioned radio and broadcasting, and he was trying to sell to his superiors the notion of radio. And this is actually one of the better examples, because how could you charge for radio? I mean, there's no way you can charge the people out there that are listening to your radio station. You're not going to knock on the doors and say, hey, you're listening to my radio station, you need to pay. They came up with a different model, of course, which is advertising. Television. For God's sake, go down to the reception and get rid of a lunatic who's down there. He says he's got a machine for seeing by wireless. And this was the editor of the Daily Express in response to this visit by John Logie Baird, another guy that we are going to be talking about later. Computers came in the wartime. I think there's a world market for maybe 5 computers. And this was the president of, chairman of IBM 43. And if he was looking at this, he was maybe right, because really big, really expensive, and the only potential buyers for computers that limited and that big were nation states. But then we know history was totally different. Computers got smaller, and until they became personal. And there's no reason for any individual to have a computer in their home, and this is Kenneth Olson, and we're going to talk about this guy a little bit today. Digital Equipment Corporation is a perfect company to talk about disruptive technology, because they were very disruptive in the market, and they died. So they rose fast, and they died fast. And this is one of the reasons that they did not survive, because the mentality was like this. Of course, everybody got personal computers. The personal computer became faster than their computers, mini computers, so the company finally got sold. The Internet. The Internet is a shallow and unreliable electronic repository of dirty pictures, inaccurate rumor, bad spelling, and worse grammar, inhabited largely by people with no demonstrable social skill. This is 97. And there were a lot of people that were of this opinion in the early stages of the web. Why would anybody do this? And this is just for porn, and people are So it was associated with a lot of bad things. Of course, we know different today. Even porn is becoming, a few years ago, porn was stopped being the #1 activity on the internet because the other thing grew. I'm not sure if porn slowed down, but the people are doing other things. I think that digital photography is romantic. I don't think digital photography is romantic yet. It's not sympathetic the way film is. So this was said by an American actor, and I think he was talking about more like films, as in motion pictures. There were a lot of skeptics for the digital camera, many skeptics. But the cameras are getting better, and they will become. I mean, then you can have software that can get any effect that film can, you know. And finally, this one. The knowledge transition was much more rapid for those learning from printed material. There is a website called eBook Skeptic that has huge propaganda for against the ebook, and this is probably the technology today that you have the most skeptics. Okay, let's continue. Before we go into the study exercise, I want to tell you a story. So I work for a company that I founded many years ago called Betware. And I was thinking that the marketing department was releasing some press release because there are a lot of emails coming in. But the company goes back a few years. And so do you know this place? Yes, this is Iceland. Where in Iceland is this? Ah, Mývatn. Beautiful place. But it is very remote. If you want to be in the middle of nowhere, where there's no technology, you go to this place. But there's phone there, and there are hotels there. So, and I was asked in '95 to have a keynote presentation for the Nordic Marketing Conference of lottery companies. So my company is in the lottery business, or that's where we ended up being. Now, the Nordic companies, lottery companies, so these are the companies that run lotto and sports betting and all these products. And in '95, the market is very stable and it's very mature. They are selling their lottery tickets, advertising, they're selling sports betting tickets, sports pool, and life is good. They are not competing because you cannot, in one country, buy a lottery ticket in another country unless you go there. So there is no cross-border betting. And these guys, they would meet every year and share all their secrets. Because if one company would give secrets to another company, we tried this, it worked, you should try it. Because they were not in competition. They were state-owned monopolies. And then I came to this conference and I had this desktop computer with me and a modem. This is '95, so the way to connect to the internet was with modems. And I had been developing since '94 the first internet solution for lotteries in the world. And this was launched, it was actually launched a year later publicly, but we built it in '95 and it was ready in '95. But there were legal payment issues, legal issues delayed this for a year. So I had this system that could buy lottery tickets over the internet, actually sports betting tickets. And I came there and I had to explain to them what the internet was because it was not that common knowledge. So I explained the internet, how it worked, and with my desktop, I mean, the laptops. I couldn't afford to buy a laptop at that time. So I had my desktop with me, a modem, and I dialed up to Reykjavik. The server was in Reykjavik. I dialed in to the internet service provider that I was subscribing to, and then opened the page of the server in Reykjavik and demonstrated this to them. And I just showed them the steps. So I'm buying I'm buying a sports betting ticket here, and boom, it's bought. And then are there any questions? And there were no questions for a while. It was sort of like something happened in the room. There was silence. And then somebody said, you know, how fast is this computer that you have? You know, why would they ask that? Why would they ask how fast the computer is? What difference does that make? Well, I said to them, well, it doesn't really depend on this computer. It more depends on the speed of the network and the server in Reykjavik and how many people are using the server. And then there was silence again, and then all of a sudden something changed in the room. Because they realized, being there in the middle of nowhere, I just bought a lottery ticket or sports betting ticket over the internet, and I could be anywhere in the world. All I needed is an internet access. So the second question was, do you mean that you could be anywhere in the world when you buy this? Yes, isn't it great? And I became enemy number one at that moment of the lottery industry. And me and Stefan, my partner, we co-founded the company. We were the most hated man in this business to begin with. The meeting just was over by that time, and they actually were discussing among themselves, how can we stop this? Who is the president of the internet? We need to get that guy and sue him. Somebody actually said this. So they saw their world, their cozy world, crumble down. And I delivered this brutal message to them. So they realized that the world that they were living in was about to get disrupted. So for 10 years, this is in 95, for 10 years, they tried to ban the internet and internet betting. They tried everything. Then in 2005, some of our clients, they even opened up their own internet betting, but it was very slow. In sort of mid-last decade, they realized we can't fight this. This is like trying to stop the rain or something. It doesn't work. So they decided to compete with the avalanche of internet sites that were illegal. Because what happened? That if they didn't go to the internet themselves, somebody else will, and somebody else did. So before 2000, there were lots of illegal sports betting sites offering sports betting, and they started to lose money. So their world just crumbled down. If you're in business, you have to look at how innovation is going to change and impact the companies, what you are working on. This is something that you have to be aware of, because only the paranoid will survive. You have to be a little bit paranoid. You have to be also aware that, for example, when I founded my first company, before the lottery company, we were going into e-commerce solutions, and we were so convinced that we were too late to the market. We thought we were too late, but in fact we were probably 5 to 10 years too early. But we always got this feeling that we were too late. So timing is really the difficult part. Okay, and why is it difficult to see things coming? And it's because sometimes you have these sustaining innovation, gradual improvements. Technology just gets better. It takes a long time. And when you have mature markets like airlines, going into this business has to be, you have to add some value to the product. The planes are getting, better and better. They fly. They're more fuel efficient. The computers are getting faster. Every year there's a new version of Office. The TV screens are getting bigger, brighter. So it's always gradual improvements. All of these, they don't make much margin. Office probably does. But if you look at the computer business and the TV business, there's the people the companies that are making TVs, they probably are not making a lot of high margins because it's a business where the technology is mature and it's very difficult to squeeze profit out of it. It's something that people call red ocean industries. There was a book written about this, a theory, the blue ocean theory, where you have the blue ocean, which is where you are alone, and the red ocean, where everybody's competing. It's a bloody competition. The boundaries are well known. The rules are established. Sustained innovation, and products become commodities. Commodities is something that you sort of take for granted. It's for example, TV. I know some of you may have an opinion of TV screens, but many people don't. They just go to the store and they buy a TV, and all the TVs are the same to them. The price is the only distinguishing factor, and they want to. Some are better, but most people don't care. So to them, TV is a commodity, just like a toothpaste. So if you can't find if you have a favorite toothpaste, if people actually have favorite toothpaste, if it is not in the store, you would buy the next one, and really don't know the difference. So it's a very established, commoditized business. But then some disruption usually happens that kills this business or disrupts it. And this is what we mean by disrupting technology. And there are a few ways this can be done. It can be by value innovation. So for example, here's a way to build a product and sell a product. Everybody's been doing this for years and years and years. Then somebody comes up with a new business idea and gives greater values and destroys the red ocean industry. It could be utility, convenience, like I said, with the digital cameras. It could be price, cost, position. So they find a way to add much better value to this. Or it could be just something completely new that didn't exist and is fulfilling needs that were not fulfilled. I have lots of examples on this. So disruptive technology, what's that? If we define it, the product performance is good enough to fulfill an unfilled need in the market. And there are many, many examples of this. All of these are disruptive technologies. The PC was the disruptive technology. And if you think about the PC, for example, when the PC came out first in 75, but really to the market in 81 with the IBM, Apple 77. So around this time, people could buy this. But the performance was really bad. It was really difficult to use these computers. They were not very user-friendly. But this was the only computing power that you could have. You could go to the data centers, big data centers, with your program or problem, and have the data centers talk to some guys, give them a job, and they will execute it. And you get the results back day after. But if you can have your own personal, that was a huge revolution. And it was very disruptive. The CD-ROM, we talked about that. Very convenient. The Encyclopedia killed the Britannica, and so on. So we have a theory on this, and this is what we call the Disruptive Innovation Theory. And this is from this Christofferson that I mentioned earlier. And the theory says that new organizations can use relatively simple, convenient, low-cost innovation to create growth and triumph over powerful incumbents. So this is the theory. So you have something, new organization. It's very difficult for incumbents to disrupt themselves. It's very difficult. New organization Simple, convenient, low cost, whatever it is, they add some value proposition to the customers and kill the business. So here's the illustration of this. You have the disruptive line there, but the lines there, the low quality use, medium, high quality, most demanding use. So imagine a product. It could be any product. And you have low quality product, and it's getting better all the time. You know, it could be TVs. You have the low quality TV, you have the medium quality TV, and then you have really the high quality, very expensive. And all of these have some markets. And then comes this disruptive, low cost technology with, to begin with, worse quality than the low quality here, but it's much cheaper, much something. And there actually can be two types of disruptive technologies. And one of them is the low end. This can occur when existing products and services are too good and overpriced and relative to the value overpriced relative to the value existing customer can use, so value innovation. Now, let's take a few examples to illustrate this. So let's say you want to go out and buy a furniture. And a few years ago, all the stores that sell furniture, they were very well established, mature. And then this company comes along, IKEA. So what they did, they made cheap furniture. You had to put it together yourself. It came in flat packages to reduce the cost of the inventory and moving everything around. And they created a whole new market, because there was a market out there, people that they wanted furniture, and they didn't mind putting it together themselves. They didn't mind that because it was cheap. So this is value innovation. This is somebody coming up with a great idea to innovate. So IKEA is a perfect example. Another example is this company. Now, when they came to the market, how would you buy a computer? You would go to the computer store, and the computer was there, and you would say to the salesperson, I want to buy this one, and then you would take it home. Dell did something else. They didn't have any stores. They didn't have any inventory. They only had factories building those. So how would you get a computer for them? By mail. You would call them and say, I want a computer. This is just like ordering a pizza. I mean, they will put it in the oven when they take your order. They will bake it. And the same with Dell. They would take your order. So you want this model here, and how much memory would you like? Okay, and how would you do it? Okay, we'll ship it tomorrow. And then this went to the factory. They built it just in time. They were taking orders all the time and shipped it. A couple of days later, you would get the computer in the mail. Totally destroyed the market for computers, and they came much, much lower. Another example is eBay of trading, selling. But IKEA, Dell, perfect examples. It could also be new markets. Occurs when the characteristics of existing products limit the number of potential consumers and force consumption to take place in a convenient centralized settings. So there are examples of this. The car was created a new market. The telephone created a new market. The consumers were not using any other products. And for example, the best example is this. So people were not using computers because it was off limits. And here's an illustration taken from Christensen. So you have new market disruption like the telephone, personal computers, photocopiers, and low end, which means that you can provide much better value by doing something completely different. Now, I mentioned digital. They came into the mini computer business and then also died. And this is what is called the innovator's dilemma. So you invent this company here. You come with new technology, and you disrupt the old business, and you succeed, build a huge company. And what do you do when you build a company? Okay, you hire lots of smart people, and then you have to create some work processes. You have to establish the values of the companies, and soon you have hundreds, thousands of people in the company. Train them to do your business, and then the technology changes again. For example, in the computer industry. So the digital, they created the mini computers, disrupted the mainframes, but then they didn't adapt when the PC came. So the innovator's dilemma says that firms that succeed in one generation of innovation almost inevitably become hamstrung by their own success and thus doomed to lose out in the next wave of innovation. So this is very common. They become successful and then die because they didn't adapt. And I have lots of examples of this, which we're going to talk about later. Here are some examples of companies. Western Union, of course, you know that. They were very successful in the telegraph industry. They didn't adapt to the telephone. They couldn't do it. They missed the opportunity, had to do something else. Big company today, so they diversified. IBM, IBM was 100 years old last year, I think. They built the first PC. They broke all the rules, and then they lost the market. And of course, they are doing a lot of other stuff. Digital, they created the mini computers, disrupted the mainframe market, offered lower performance, better value for their customers. They didn't adapt and got sold to some other company. MITS, these are the guys that created the first PC. Very successful, and then didn't adapt, died. Netscape, you know the Netscape story? Netscape controlled 90-something% of the browser market. Really successful. They got a huge stock IPO, had a lot of money, and then boom. So the innovative dilemma says that if you come in with new technology, it's not guaranteed that you can win. And there are lots of reasons why this is. So if you're running a business, the environment you work in is not only technology. There are other things like legal, regulatory things. For example, in my business, the lottery industry, there are a lot of regulatory things going on right now in the market that we are working in. We look at that as an opportunity, but the lotteries, they look at it as a threat. Political environment, and so on. Technology is one of them. Okay, let's come back to Western Union. There's actually a theory that explains why they turned down the telephone. And it's called the RPV theory. So, second theory, two theories today, the innovators theory, disruptive innovation theory, and the RPV theory. And it says resources, what the firm has, processes, what the firm does, and the values, what the firm wants to do, defines the organizational strengths and weaknesses. So, good management practice. You have to build processes. Put the values on the wall. Write them down. Communicate them to everybody in the company. Create processes. This is how we do business. And then hire all these bright people into the company. They all share the same values. They all share the same mentality. And you have a very, very strong company doing a very good job. But it defines their weakness. So if there comes a new technology, maybe the resources, which is the people, maybe they don't have the mentality to understand this new technology. So to be practical, you have to just get rid of them and get new ones. But that's not what companies do. And all the processes, in my company, every time somebody says we need to make a process, I say why? Why do we need a process? Processes are for stupid people that don't know how to work. And then they get offended, of course, and so on. Because putting it like this is insulting. It's actually for people that are not allowed to think. So they don't have to be stupid. They're not allowed to think. So if you're working on a job that doesn't require any creativity, you have to do these tasks here. You have to do them in order, and you can't forget anybody. Perfect for processes. But the problem is, if you make too many processes, if something changes, you need to do something else, it's difficult to adapt because everybody's going by the process. And the values, this is what you stand for, and so on. So this explains why Western Union didn't adapt to telephone, and many others. So the organizations successfully tackle opportunities when they have the resources, when they have the processes, and when they have the values to allow it. So, digital. When the PC came along, the management said, we need to look into this PC. Somebody would say it and get it approved after a few times. So we'll put a team to work on a PC. And who do they put on the team? Not the best engineers, because they are working on the real stuff. So they will put some people on it that may not have the skills, and if they have the skills, they probably don't have the political clout within the company to succeed. So doomed to fail. 4 times, Digital Equipment Corporation tried to build a PC, and 4 times it failed. At least nobody bought him. It was just too expensive. They didn't have the mentality to do it. So the resources are all of these things here, the process, all these things, and values, all of these. So when you've built on a mature company, you have all these things, it becomes difficult to change. I know what I'm talking about. I've been in the industry. I've been 30 years in this industry. How does that help you understand technology that is 6 months old in a youth-oriented culture? The technology we are working with was maybe invented a few years ago. So if you've been in the industry 30 years, like I have, you have to adapt. And digital is a perfect example. They didn't. They just didn't have the mentality to do this. So Western Union, let's look at them. So the telephone was a new market disruptive innovation. Okay. And Western Union's resources, policies, and values meant that what ultimately became right course appeared to be unattractive at the outset. So they actually looked at this. They actually looked at the technology. They had a team examine the technology and came to the conclusion that this was not what the customers were asking for. Nobody was asking for telephones. Why? They didn't know it existed even. Nobody was asking for it. They looked at their sales revenue. Where are they coming from? How much are coming from telephone? No, nothing. We don't make it even. And it didn't appear to be a good thing to go into. And the technological challenge of wiring all these things together was so big. So they came to the conclusion this is not going to work. And then finally they saw that, what happened? Finally they saw that entrants are improving, like Bell technology was improving, and by the time they acted, it was too late. It only took them a few years to realize that it was that this was not the clear course. And sometimes it has to be. Sometimes it's just, in what business are you? I mean, if you're in the telegraph business, you die with the death of the telegraph. If you're in the communication business, you can survive because you don't care what the communication method is. You're in the communication business, but they were in the telegraph business. Okay, disruption that is currently today, book publishers are getting disrupted today, as you know. In a few years it will be like this when you give the kids' book. Hey, check it out, no screens, no downloads, no buttons, no batteries. Just flip those things. So a few years, this is a screenshot from the future TV broadcasters. I think they are getting disrupted. Another example. So key concepts today. Disruptive Innovation Theory, Innovators' Dilemma, Resources, Processes, and Values Theory. Now, on Friday we're going to talk about study exercise, talk about adoption of technology, and I want you to think about this. Why is it that good products fail and inferior, good enough products succeed? What is the customer buying?